Standing in that glittering ballroom, Nandi Nelson was restless. Her hired escort had cancelled, and she was about to face humiliation. She was about risking everything she'd built as Chicago's premier matchmaker, who had orchestrated love for over 300 people, but couldn't find love for herself. Tonight, her ex-boyfriend was publicly destroying her reputation, placing bets on her loneliness. Then a hand touched her waist. A voice like smoke whispered, "Trust me." And a devastatingly handsome stranger offered to play her boyfriend. She didn't know he was sent to the wrong wedding by his meddling aunt. She didn't know he was transitioning his murdered father's criminal empire and working with the FBI. She didn't know their fake 3-month engagement would explode into headlines, federal investigations, and a love so consuming it would rewrite both their lives. All she knew was, his hand was on her waist, his lips were inches from hers, and she was about to take the biggest gamble of her life. Before we continue, you're welcome to my channel, Afro-Korean Tales. Kindly hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Now grab a popcorn, let's go on a ride. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel sparkled like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across polished marble floors. Ivory roses climbed architectural columns, their perfume mixing with champagne bubbles that seemed to dance in the air itself. Every detail was perfection, and Nandi Nelson had orchestrated all of it. Well, not the wedding itself. That was all Sarah and David Mitchell. But the match? That was all Nandi. She stood at the periphery of the celebration, her emerald green gown a jewel tone against the soft whites and golds surrounding her. The color complemented her deep brown skin beautifully, and she'd twisted her natural curls into an elegant updo that her mother back in Addis Ababa would have approved of. For the 5th time in 10 minutes, she checked her phone. Still no message from Brandon, the hired escort who was supposed to arrive 45 minutes ago. What Nandi didn't know was that Brandon was currently hunched over his toilet in his Lincoln Park apartment, violently ill from the questionable sushi he'd eaten for lunch. He'd sent the cancellation text, but it had gotten caught in the hotel's notoriously poor cellular reception. The message sat in digital limbo, waiting to shatter Nandi's carefully constructed plan. Around her, 18 couples laughed and danced and touched each other with the unconscious intimacy of people who genuinely belonged together. She'd matched every single one of them. Sarah and David were cutting their cake now, feeding each other with the kind of tenderness that made something twist painfully in Nandi's chest. She'd built an empire on creating moments exactly like this one. 12 years ago, she'd left Ethiopia with nothing but a dream and her grandmother's blessing. Her father, an Ethiopian diplomat, had married an American woman, giving Nandi dual heritage and the Nelson surname. Now she ran the most exclusive matchmaking service in Chicago. But she couldn't seem to create a love story for herself. Nandi Nelson. The voice sliced through her thoughts like a razor blade wrapped in velvet. She turned slowly, deliberately, fixing her professional smile in place. Marcus Whitmore stood 5 feet away, his Tom Ford tuxedo fitted to absolute perfection, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. Her ex-boyfriend. The best man. The entire reason she'd hired a fake date in the first place. While they were dating, Marcus had been using her business as a front for money laundering when he lost his job. Wedding vendors, inflated invoices, her clients' trust. He'd exploited all of it. Then came the final blow, finding out he was cheating. And when she'd broken up with him, calling out his narcissism and emotional manipulation, he'd made it his mission to destroy her reputation. Petty revenge, he'd told himself. But really, it was about control. About punishing a woman who dared to see through him. Marcus. Her voice came out steady, controlled. Professional. The slight Ethiopian accent she'd never quite lost added a melodic quality to her words. Beautiful ceremony. You must be enjoying yourself. Where's your date? He stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. I heard you were bringing someone special. His date, a woman named Brittany whose entire personality seemed to consist of giggling and agreeing with everything Marcus said, tittered behind her perfectly manicured hand. He's parking, Nandi said smoothly, the lie tasting like copper on her tongue. Parking. Marcus's laugh carried across the ballroom, turning heads. Nandi, please. We both know you're here alone. Again. Heat crawled up her neck, but she kept her expression neutral. Years of dealing with difficult clients had trained her well. You know what I've been telling people? Marcus leaned in, whiskey breath washing over her. That you can find everyone else their perfect match, but you can't find one for yourself. You can't replace me. It's tragic, really. Almost poetic. Around them, guests were starting to notice. Sarah Mitchell caught Nandi's eye from across the room, her bridal glow dimming with concern. She'd heard the rumors Marcus had been spreading. She'd wanted to warn Nandi, but hadn't known how to broach the subject without sounding like she was pitying her. Nandi's phone finally buzzed in her clutch. The delayed message had broken through. She pulled it out with hands that had started shaking. Brandon, Companion Connect. I've got food poisoning. Can't make it. So sorry. Full refund processing. The words blurred. Her stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. Marcus was still talking, his voice rising with performative sympathy. I actually placed bets with the groomsmen. Told them she'd show up solo. The matchmaker who can't even. Sorry I'm late, darling. The voice came from directly behind Nandi. Male. Deep. With an accent that wrapped around the English words like silk around steel. Before Nandi could process what was happening, a hand touched the small of her back. Warm. Confident. Possessive in a way that sent electricity down her spine. She spun around and looked up. The man standing there stole every thought from her head. He was tall, easily 6'3", with coal-black hair styled back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. Sharp jaw, full lips, dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything about her in a single glance. Korean, she registered somewhere in the back of her mind. Devastatingly handsome in a way that made her forget how to breathe. What Nandi couldn't know was that this man, Kai Park, had been equally surprised to find himself at this wedding. His aunt, a traditional Korean matchmaker with a tendency toward meddling, had told him he had an appointment with Chicago's most celebrated matchmaker. She'd failed to mention that the matchmaker would be attending a wedding. Or that she'd be expecting someone else entirely. Or that Kai's aunt had orchestrated this entire coincidence, after researching Nandi for months and deciding she was perfect for her stubborn, emotionally closed-off nephew. Traffic was absolutely terrible, Kai said, his gaze locked on Nandi's with an intensity that made her skin flush. I hope I didn't worry you too much. Nandi's brain had completely short-circuited. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Who the hell was this man? But Kai's hand pressed gently, meaningfully, against her back. A silent message. Play along. In that split second, Kai had assessed the situation with the precision of someone trained to read rooms and power dynamics. The drunk ex-boyfriend. The woman clearly in distress. The watching crowd. He'd spent his entire adult life navigating dangerous situations in his family's import-export business, which was a polite term for operations that existed in the gray areas of international trade. Reading people, adapting to unexpected circumstances, these were survival skills. And something about this woman, with her elegant posture and barely concealed panic, made him want to help. Nandi swallowed hard. No. I'm just glad you're here. Kai's smile widened, transforming his face from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. He turned to Marcus, extending his free hand with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he owned every room he entered. You must be Marcus Whitmore, he said smoothly. Nandi's mentioned you. Once. The single word landed like a dismissal. Marcus's expression flickered. Confusion, then suspicion. Then something that might have been intimidation. In his whiskey-hazed state, Marcus was trying to process this development. Who is this man? Where had he come from? More importantly, how did he make Marcus feel somehow smaller, despite Marcus being the same height? I don't believe we've met, Marcus said, trying to reclaim control of the conversation. Kai Park. The handshake looked firm enough to hurt, and Marcus winced slightly. Nandi's boyfriend. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Boyfriend. Brittany whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Oh my God, boyfriend? Marcus recovered quickly, his smile turning predatory. That's interesting. Funny thing is, Nandi never mentioned having a boyfriend. Not once. And we talk regularly, don't we, Nandi? About business, of course. We keep things private. Kai's hand slid from Nandi's back to her waist, pulling her closer against his side. The heat of him seeped through the thin fabric of her dress. Nandi doesn't like to mix her business and personal life. Something about maintaining professional boundaries and credibility. He said it like he knew her. Like they'd had this exact conversation 100 times before. Nandi's heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. But something in Kai's confident performance steadied her. This stranger was offering her a lifeline, and some instinct told her to grab it. How long have you two been together? Marcus demanded, his composure cracking slightly. 6 months, Kai said without a moment's hesitation, as if he'd rehearsed this. Though honestly, it feels longer. You know how it is when you meet the right person. When you know, you just know. He looked down at Nandi, and the expression in his dark eyes was so tender, so genuine, that for a moment she forgot this was a performance. Forgot that this stranger had appeared out of nowhere. Forgot everything except the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. What neither of them realized was that the performance was already blurring into something real. Kai, who'd built walls around his heart after watching his father's murder 3 years ago, felt something crack in his chest. And Nandi, who'd convinced herself she was unlovable after Marcus's systematic emotional abuse, felt a flutter of hope she'd thought was dead. Isn't that right, darling? Kai's thumb traced small circles on her hip. Nandi managed a nod, not trusting her voice. Marcus's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. What do you do, Kai? Import, export. International trade, primarily between Korea and the States. Kai's tone was casual, but something flickered in his expression. Something darker that Marcus, in his intoxicated state, completely missed. Boring business talk, really. I'd much rather hear about Nandi's work. Did you know she's matched over 200 couples? Including tonight's bride and groom. He said it loud enough for nearby guests to hear. People turned, smiling. Several raised their glasses toward Nandi. She's extraordinary, Kai continued, his thumb still drawing those maddening circles on her hip. Beautiful, brilliant. The kind of woman who changes lives just by existing. The kind of woman who sees potential in people they don't even see in themselves. Each word landed like a small detonation in Nandi's chest. These were the words she'd wanted Marcus to say 3 years ago when they were together. When she'd thought he loved her. When she'd believed he saw her the way she wanted to be seen. Marcus's face was turning red, his buzz shifting from pleasant to angry. Well, I should. One more thing. Kai's voice dropped, quiet and dangerous in a way that made the hair on Nandi's arms stand up. Nandi mentioned you've been telling people she's undateable. That she's somehow broken or deficient. Marcus went very still. Around them, several guests had stopped even pretending not to listen. Let me be clear. Kai's smile didn't reach his eyes. The only person who couldn't see Nandi's worth was you. And that says everything about you and absolutely nothing about her. Do you understand? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Brittany tugged on his sleeve, whispering urgently that they should go. Then Kai turned away, dismissing Marcus entirely like he was nothing more than an inconvenient interruption. Shall we dance? He asked Nandi softly, his voice warm again. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Kai led her onto the dance floor, his hand warm and sure at the small of her back. His other hand found hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. They began to move together, and somehow, impossibly, they fit. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The band was playing something slow and romantic. Around them, other couples swayed, lost in their own worlds. Who are you? Nandi whispered in Amharic before she could stop herself. Kai's lips curved. He didn't speak the language, but he understood the tone. Your appointment, he replied in English, but with perfect understanding. Your matchmaking service sent me. Nandi blinked, switching back to English. I didn't. I hired an actor from Companion Connect. Something shifted in Kai's expression. I don't know what Companion Connect is. My aunt runs a traditional Korean marriage coordination service. She called me 2 weeks ago, insisting I had an appointment tonight with Chicago's best matchmaker, a woman named Nandi Nelson. She said it was time I got serious about finding a wife. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of cosmic coincidence that seemed impossible. Or, more likely, the machinations of a determined Korean auntie who decided to take matters into her own hands. Oh God, Nandi breathed. There's been a mistake. Apparently. Kai's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. But you looked like you needed help. And I didn't like the way that man spoke to you. The song swelled around them. Nandi knew she should step back, apologize, explain the confusion, and send him on his way. But Kai was looking at her like she was precious. Like she mattered. And it had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way. Kai, for his part, was experiencing something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not since watching his father bleed out on a warehouse floor, murdered by associates who'd decided the Park family had outlived its usefulness. He'd hardened himself after that, focused only on taking over the family business and making it legitimate. Making it safe. No relationships, no vulnerabilities, no weaknesses that could be exploited. But this woman in his arms, with her intelligent eyes and barely concealed strength, made him want to try again. When the music ended, when they stopped moving, Nandi did something she'd never done before. She kissed him. She pulled him down and pressed her lips to his, right there in the middle of the dance floor with 200 people watching. It was supposed to be gratitude. A thank you for the rescue, for the kind words, for making Marcus finally shut up. But Kai kissed back, and it wasn't grateful. It was claiming. His hand cupped the back of her neck, fingers threading through her curls. His mouth moved against hers with the kind of skill that made her forget where they were. Forget that they were strangers. Forget everything except the heat of him and the way her heart was racing and the fact that she never wanted this moment to end. Around them, the crowd erupted in applause and wolf whistles. Sarah Mitchell was crying happy tears. Even the wedding photographer had redirected his camera to capture the moment. Marcus, watching from the bar where he'd retreated, felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Nandi was supposed to show up alone, humiliated, her business reputation in tatters from the rumors he'd been carefully spreading. Instead, she was kissing a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, and everyone was celebrating it. When Nandi and Kai finally broke apart, both breathless, she whispered against his lips, "Thank you." Kai's eyes were dark, intense, searching hers. "You're welcome." What neither of them knew was that across town, FBI agents were compiling evidence for a case that would intersect with both their lives. Marcus Whitmore had been on their radar for 6 months, his money laundering operation increasingly sloppy as his drinking increased. And Kai Park, who'd been quietly cooperating with federal authorities to legitimize his family's business, had just provided the final piece of evidence they needed. The wedding continued. Dinner was served, an elaborate 5-course meal. Speeches were made. More dancing. Nandi and Kai stayed together the entire time, maintaining their performance. But somewhere between the entree and dessert, it stopped feeling like a performance. They really talked, in stolen moments between social obligations. Kai learned that Nandi had left Ethiopia at 22 with just enough money for a plane ticket and 3 months' rent. That she'd worked 3 jobs while building her matchmaking business. That her grandmother, who'd raised her after her mother died, had told her that finding love for others was a sacred calling. Nandi learned that Kai's father had built an empire that straddled legal and illegal enterprises. That Kai had been groomed since childhood to take over, never given a choice about his future. That he was now trying to transition everything to legitimate businesses, despite resistance from his father's old associates. They didn't share everything. There were secrets on both sides, truths too dangerous or too painful to speak aloud. But they shared enough. As the wedding wound down, as guests began filtering out into the Chicago night, Kai said quietly, "My car's outside. Can I give you a ride home?" Nandi should have said no. Should have thanked him politely and called a rideshare. Should have ended this strange, wonderful evening and gone back to her regular life. Instead, she said yes. Kai's car was the sleekest Mercedes Nandi had ever seen. All black, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that whispered wealth and power. A driver in a crisp black suit opened the door without a word, his face professionally blank. Nandi slid into leather seats that smelled like expensive cologne and secrets. Kai settled beside her, close enough that their thighs almost touched. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Lincoln Park." "Fullerton Avenue," Nandi said, then paused. "Actually, I need to explain about the mix-up. About why I was expecting someone else." As the car pulled smoothly into Chicago traffic, Kai listened while Nandi explained about Marcus, about the rumors, about hiring Companion Connect to provide a fake boyfriend just for one night. Just to prove she wasn't the pathetic, undateable failure Marcus was painting her as. "My aunt has been trying to marry me off for 2 years, Kai said when she finished. "She runs a very traditional Korean matchmaking service. Old school. The kind where families arrange introductions, and everyone pretends it's romantic destiny instead of calculated compatibility." He turned to look at Nandi, and in the dim light of the car's interior, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. "When she told me I had an appointment with Chicago's best matchmaker, I assumed she'd arranged another introduction without asking me first. She does that. Has me meet daughters of her friends, nieces of business associates. It's exhausting." "I'm sorry," Nandi said, and she meant it. "You got caught up in something that had nothing to do with you." "Did I?" Kai's expression was unreadable. "Because from where I'm sitting, I just spent the evening with the most interesting woman I've met in years. That doesn't feel like a burden." Nandi's breath caught. The car turned onto Lake Shore Drive, city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan like fallen stars. "What if," Kai said slowly, carefully, "we helped each other?" "What do you mean?" "My family wants me married. Your ex is spreading rumors about you." Kai's expression was calculating now, the businessman emerging. "What if we continue the performance? A mutually beneficial arrangement." "You mean fake date?" Nandi's voice came out higher than intended. "For what, a few months? Until my family stops pressuring me and your reputation is secure." Kai tilted his head, studying her. "Think about it. You're a matchmaker. You create relationships for a living. This would just be a business arrangement with clear terms and boundaries. I don't even know you. Then we'll get to know each other." Kai's smile was dangerous, the kind that probably made people agree to things they shouldn't. "Unless you'd prefer Marcus, continue telling everyone you're alone and desperate." Nandi's jaw clenched. She thought about the past 6 months. The whispers at networking events. The clients who'd asked, pointedly, why her own love life was such a disaster if she was such an expert at creating relationships. The slow erosion of her credibility. What she didn't know was that it wasn't just whispers. Marcus had been systematically contacting her clients, planting seeds of doubt, suggesting her methods were questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. 3 couples had already canceled their contracts. More were considering it. 3 months, Kai offered. "We attend a few family events, some public appearances. Make it look real. Then we have an amicable breakup. Clean. Professional. No complications." "Why would you do this?" Nandi searched his face for the catch, the hidden agenda. "You don't know me. You have no reason to help me." Kai's gaze held hers, intense and unreadable. "Because Marcus was right about one thing. You are extraordinary. And someone should tell you that." The car stopped outside Nandi's building, a renovated brownstone in one of Lincoln Park's quieter streets. Kai pulled out a business card, heavy cardstock with minimalist lettering. Just a phone number. Nothing else. Think about it, he said softly. Call me when you decide. Nandi took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. She climbed out of the car, walked to her apartment, and sat on her couch in the dark. A fake relationship. 3 months. With a stranger who kissed like sin and looked at her like she mattered. It was absurd. Unprofessional. Possibly dangerous. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. For what it's worth, that kiss felt pretty real to me. Nandi stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. She'd built her entire career on authentic connections, on matching people based on genuine compatibility. This was the opposite of everything she believed in. But then she thought about Marcus's smug face. About the clients she'd lost. About the whispers that followed her everywhere. She typed, "When do we start?" The response came immediately, "Tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 7. We have a lot to discuss." Nandi set down her phone and looked around her apartment. Photos of successful matches lined her walls. Couples she'd brought together, relationships she'd helped create. All real. All authentic. She was about to create the fakest relationship of her career. The irony wasn't lost on her. What Nandi didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Kai was sitting in the back of his Mercedes, staring at his own phone with an expression his driver had never seen before. Something like hope mixed with fear. Kai had just agreed to a fake relationship with a woman he'd kissed exactly once. A woman who made him feel things he'd thought died with his father. A woman who was already complicating everything. His phone buzzed. A text from his aunt in Korean. "Did you meet her? Is she perfect? I knew you would like her." Kai typed back, "You meddling woman. You planned this entire thing, didn't you?" The response, "Of course. You would never choose for yourself. You're welcome. Wedding invitation will be in the mail soon." Despite everything, despite the complications he could already see forming, Kai smiled. They met the next evening at a restaurant in River North. One of those places with white tablecloths, menus without prices, and waitstaff who moved like ghosts. Kai arrived first, somehow making a simple black button-down and dark jeans look like haute couture. He stood when Nandi approached, and the gesture was so old-fashioned, so courtly, that it made something flutter in her chest. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. "Against my better judgment." Nandi sat, smoothing her burgundy dress. She'd changed 3 times before settling on this one. Professional but attractive. Confident, but not trying too hard. Kai ordered in fluent Korean, then turned to Nandi with a smile. "I hope you like seafood." "Love it." Nandi pulled out her laptop. "I drafted a contract." Kai's eyebrows rose, disappearing beneath the fall of his dark hair. "A contract. I'm a professional." Nandi opened the document, angling the screen so they could both see. "If we're doing this, we need clear boundaries. Clear expectations." Kai leaned back in his chair, and there was something appreciative in his gaze. Like he hadn't expected this. Like he was impressed. "I'm listening." Nandi read from the screen. "Duration: 3 months from today. Public appearances as needed, with 24 hours notice when possible. Physical affection, hand-holding, casual touching, and light kissing acceptable in public settings." She paused, meeting his eyes. "Private boundaries. Separate living spaces. No intimacy beyond what's necessary for appearances. Financial arrangement, split costs for dates and public appearances. No gifts over $100. "I disagree." Nandi blinked. "Excuse me. If we're engaged." "We're not engaged." "We will be." Kai's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "My mother will expect a ring within a month. She's traditional. She'll want to meet your family. She'll ask about wedding plans, venue preferences, how many children we want." Nandi's stomach dropped. I thought this was just casual dating." "That's why I'm telling you now." Kai's expression softened slightly. "I'll handle my family. But you need to be prepared. This won't be a few casual dates and Instagram photos. My mother will investigate you. My aunt will ask intrusive questions." He paused, something dark flickering across his face. And my father's associates will want to know who's dating a park. Your father's associates? Nandi prompted carefully. My father is dead. Kai's voice went flat. But the people he worked with aren't. And they have opinions about who joins the family. A waiter appeared with their appetizers, some kind of seafood arrangement that probably cost more than Nandi's monthly car payment. When he left, Nandi said quietly, "What exactly does your family do?" "Import, export." "Like I said. That's vague. It's complicated." Kai held her gaze, and there was something challenging in his expression. "My family has business interests that require discretion. But I promise you'll be safe." "Are you involved in something illegal?" Kai's silence was answer enough. What Nandi didn't know was that Kai had spent the past 2 years systematically extracting his family's business from illegal operations. His father, Park Jin-woo, had built an empire that moved everything from legitimate electronics to counterfeit goods to occasional shipments that crossed into much darker territory. When Jin-woo was murdered, a hit organized by a rival organization, Kai had inherited an empire and all its complications. He'd been working with the FBI for 18 months, providing information in exchange for immunity and help transitioning to legitimate operations. It was dangerous, complicated, and had already cost him relationships with several of his father's oldest associates. Nandi's hands clenched around her napkin. "I should walk away right now." "You should." Kai didn't look away, didn't try to soften it. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because Marcus isn't just spreading rumors, is he?" Kai leaned forward, his voice dropping. "He's actively sabotaging your business." Nandi froze. "How did you?" "I have resources. Good ones." Kai pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table. "Marcus has been contacting your clients for the past 3 months. Suggesting you're unstable, that your matches are fraudulent, that you're using unethical methods." Nandi stared at the screen. Email logs, text message screenshots, phone records. All Marcus's contact information, all her clients' names. Her vision blurred. 7 clients. The ones who'd canceled, the ones who'd suddenly gone cold. It wasn't her work. It wasn't bad luck. It was Marcus, systematically destroying everything she'd built. "How did you get this?" she whispered. What Kai didn't explain was that he'd made 2 phone calls after dropping Nandi off the previous night. One to a private investigator he kept on retainer. One to a contact in the telecommunications industry who owed him a favor. By morning, he'd had a complete dossier on Marcus Whitmore, including information that would interest both Nandi and the FBI. Like I said, resources. Kai retrieved his phone. He's been doing it methodically. 1 or 2 clients a month so you wouldn't notice a pattern. But you've lost 7 contracts in the past quarter, haven't you? Why would he do this? Her voice came out broken. Because you're successful. Kai's voice went cold, dangerous. Because he's not. Because small men destroy what they can't control or possess. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. But here's what he doesn't know, Nandi. You have something he wants. What? Protection. Kai's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Stay with me. Let me be your boyfriend, your fiancé, whatever we need to be. And Marcus won't touch you or your business ever again. What are you? Nandi asked, but she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Someone who keeps his promises. Kai's thumb traced circles on her palm. 3 months, Nandi. Help me with my family. Let me handle Marcus. And when it's over, we walk away clean. No strings. No complications. And if I say no? Then you fight Marcus alone. Kai withdrew his hand, and Nandi immediately missed the warmth. And we both know how that ends. Nandi looked at the contract on her screen. Then she looked at Kai, this dangerous, beautiful stranger offering her a devil's bargain. She thought about her business, her reputation, everything she'd built from nothing. She thought about her grandmother's blessing when she'd left Ethiopia. Be brave, Nandi. Be fierce. Take what the world owes you. She closed her laptop. Where do I sign? What neither of them realized, sitting in that expensive restaurant making plans for a fake relationship, was that they'd already started falling. That the performance had become real somewhere between that first kiss and this moment. That 3 months wouldn't be nearly enough time to untangle what they were creating. Across town, Marcus Whitmore sat in his condo, drunk and scrolling through social media. Photos from the wedding were already appearing. Nandi and Kai dancing. Nandi and Kai kissing. Comments gushing about how perfect they looked together. Marcus threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracked. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He pulled out his laptop and opened an encrypted email account. Typed a message to someone who specialized in digging up dirt, in finding secrets, in destroying people who got in the way. Find out everything about Kai Park, he wrote. Everything. 3 days later, Nandi stood outside a sprawling estate in Kenilworth, one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs. The house, calling it a house felt like an insult, looked like something out of Architectural Digest. All clean lines, massive windows, and manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff. Relax, Kai murmured, his hand on her back as they walked up the front steps. My mother will love you. How do you know? Nandi's hands were sweating. She'd researched Korean customs for hours the night before, watched YouTube videos on proper bowing etiquette, practiced saying nice to meet you in Korean until her pronunciation was perfect. Because you're brilliant, successful, and you don't take my bullshit. Kai smiled down at her. Everything she's been hoping for. What Kai didn't tell Nandi was that his mother, Park Young-hee, had been increasingly worried about him since his father's death. She'd watched her son become harder, colder, more isolated. She'd prayed every night that he would find someone to bring him back to life, to remind him that there was more to existence than business and revenge and survival. The front door opened before they reached it. Young-hee stood in the doorway, elegant in a silk hanbok, her hair swept back in a perfect chignon, her eyes sharp and assessing. She was petite, maybe 5'2", but she radiated the kind of authority that made Nandi want to stand up straighter. Yama, Kai said softly, using the Korean word for mother. This is Nandi Nelson. Nandi bowed, exactly as she'd practiced. Minasio bangasumnida, Mrs. Park. It's an honor to meet you. Young-hee's eyes widened slightly. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You speak Korean? Only a few phrases, Nandi admitted in English, straightening. I wanted to show respect. Young-hee studied Nandi for a long moment, taking in everything. The elegant posture. The direct gaze. The way she didn't fidget or look away. The way her son was standing closer to her than he'd stood to anyone in 3 years. Come inside, Young-hee finally said, stepping back. And call me Young-hee. Mrs. Park makes me feel ancient. The interior was stunning. Traditional Korean art mixed with modern minimalist furniture. Everything expensive and tasteful. A massive window overlooked Lake Michigan, the water stretching endless and blue. They ate dinner at a low table, sitting on cushions. Bulgogi and kimchi and what felt like 20 different banchan side dishes. Nandi tried everything, asking questions about the preparation, complimenting the flavors genuinely. Young-hee seemed pleased. My son tells me you're a matchmaker, Young-hee said, switching between Korean and English so fluidly that Nandi struggled to keep up. Kai translated when needed, his voice patient. Yes, ma'am. I've been in business for 5 years. Nandi met her gaze steadily. I've successfully matched over 200 couples, most of them here in Chicago. And how many successful marriages? 15 so far. The oldest is approaching their 6th anniversary. Nandi smiled. I believe in creating lasting connections. Not just chemistry or physical attraction, but genuine compatibility. Shared values. Complementary life goals. Young-hee's expression softened slightly. You understand commitment. I do. Nandi thought about her own parents' marriage. Her Ethiopian father and American mother, making their relationship work across continents, cultures, languages. Real love isn't just passion. It's choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard. Even when the differences seem insurmountable. Good. Young-hee set down her chopsticks, her gaze moving between Nandi and Kai. My son has never brought a woman to meet me. Ever. In 34 years. Do you know what that means? Nandi's throat tightened. She could feel Kai beside her, very still, his body tense in a way that suggested this was significant. It means he's serious. Young-hee looked at Kai, and her eyes were suddenly gentle, maternal in a way that made Nandi's chest ache. Your father would have liked her. Something flickered across Kai's face. Pain, quickly masked. I know, he said quietly. His hand found Nandi's under the table. Squeezed. And in that moment, Nandi realized that whatever this started as, it had already become something more complicated. Something that felt dangerously close to real. After dinner, Young-hee pulled Nandi aside in the garden. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It would have been romantic under different circumstances. He's not an easy man to love, Young-hee said bluntly, no preamble. His business, it's dangerous. Complicated. There are things he can't tell you. Things he'll never be able to tell you. I understand, Nandi said carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone navigating a minefield. Do you? Young-hee's gaze was penetrating, the kind that seemed to see through carefully constructed facades. Or are you here because he's handsome and rich and gives you the attention you crave? The words should have stung. Should have made Nandi defensive. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Perhaps because the question was fair. Perhaps because she'd been asking herself the same thing. I'm here, she said slowly, each word deliberate, because your son makes me feel seen. Like I matter. Like I'm more than just my accomplishments or my failures. She paused, and as the words formed, she realized they were true. Not part of the performance. Not calculated for effect. Just truth. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I belong. Prove I'm American enough, Ethiopian enough, successful enough, worthy enough. But when Kai looks at me, I don't feel like I need to prove anything. I just feel like myself. Young-hee smiled then, and it transformed her face. Then you're exactly what he needs. What neither woman knew was that Kai stood just inside the doorway, having come to check on them. He'd heard every word. And something in his carefully constructed armor cracked a little more. For weeks into their arrangement, both Kai and Nandi were realizing the same thing, though neither had admitted it aloud. This was no longer fake. It had started small. Kai remembering that Nandi took her coffee with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon, the way her grandmother had taught her in Addis Ababa. Showing up at her office with lunch when she was too busy to eat, always Ethiopian food from her favorite restaurant, never asking, just knowing what she'd want. Nandi finding herself thinking about him during client meetings, checking her phone for his texts, feeling a flutter in her chest when his name appeared on her screen. They had rules. Separate apartments. No real intimacy. Business arrangement only. But the rules were crumbling. Kai started texting her good morning in Amharic, phrases he'd spent hours learning specifically for her. Calling just to hear her voice, asking about her day like he genuinely cared. Showing up at her door at midnight with takeout and a movie because somehow he'd known she'd had a difficult client meeting. Nandi started keeping a toothbrush at his place. Leaving a change of clothes. Finding excuses to see him even when they didn't have scheduled appearances. They were falling and they both knew it, and neither knew how to stop. One night, curled up on Kai's couch in his penthouse apartment overlooking the lake, some action movie playing that neither was watching, Nandi finally said it. We should stop this. Kai went very still. His arm was around her shoulders, his thumb had been tracing absent patterns on her arm. He stopped. Stop what? His voice was carefully neutral. Nandi sat up, turning to look at him. The city lights behind him made his face hard to read, all shadows and angles. Pretending we're just business partners. Kai's jaw clenched. His dark eyes were unreadable in the dim light. I know. So why does it feel like you're trying to make this real? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither had been brave enough to voice. Kai's hands clenched into fists on his thighs. He was quiet for a long moment, and Nandi could see him warring with himself. This man who'd built walls around his heart after watching his father die. This man who'd convinced himself that love was a weakness he couldn't afford. "Because I am," he finally said, his voice rough, raw. "I'm trying to make this real." The confession landed like a bomb in the quiet apartment. "You can't," Nandi whispered, even as her heart raced. "This was supposed to be temporary. Safe. An arrangement. Nothing about you is safe." Kai's voice was rough, and he turned to face her fully. "You walked into my life by accident and turned everything upside down. I can't fake this anymore, Nandi. I don't want to." "Kai." He kissed her before she could finish. Not the performative kisses they'd shared in public, careful and controlled. This was desperate, consuming, real. His hands cupped her face like she was precious, breakable. His mouth moved against hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Nandi's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Every rational thought evaporated. There was only this, the heat of him, the taste of him, the way her entire body seemed to come alive under his touch. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kai pressed his forehead to hers. "Tell me you don't feel it too," he said quietly, desperately. "Tell me this is still just business to you. Tell me you don't think about me when we're apart. Tell me that kiss at the wedding was just acting." Nandi couldn't. Because she did feel it. God help her, she did. Somewhere between contract negotiations and family dinners and late-night conversations about things that mattered, she'd fallen completely, terrifyingly in love with Kai Park. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know." Kai's thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "But it did." They made love that night. Slow and reverent, like they had all the time in the world. Like they weren't on a 3-month countdown to goodbye. Kai touched her like she was art, something to be studied and appreciated and cherished. Nandi kissed him like she was memorizing the taste of him, storing it away for when this inevitable ended. Afterward, Nandi lay in Kai's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and she could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. "What happens when the 3 months are up?" she asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest. Kai's arms tightened around her. His heartbeat stuttered for just a moment. "I don't know. But I know I don't want to lose you." What he didn't say, what he couldn't say yet, was that he was already planning. Already thinking about how to make this permanent. Already imagining a future that extended beyond their agreement. What Nandi didn't say was that she was terrified. Terrified of how much she felt. Terrified that this was too good to be true. Terrified that she was breaking her own cardinal rule, never confuse performance with reality. Across town, in a dingy office in a less savory part of Chicago, a private investigator named Tom Chun was compiling a report for Marcus Whitmore. What he'd found on Kai Park was disturbing. Connections to organized crime. FBI investigations. Money laundering. A father who'd been murdered in a gang-style hit. But what interested Tom more was what he'd found on Nandi Nelson. A matchmaking business that was legitimate, successful, and completely clean. Which meant Marcus's claims about her fraudulent practices were lies. Tom had been in the business long enough to recognize when a client was the villain of the story. And Marcus Whitmore was definitely the villain. He sent the report anyway. He had bills to pay. But he also made a copy and sent it to an FBI contact with a note. "Might want to look into Marcus Whitmore. Guy's definitely into something." Sometimes doing the right thing meant hedging your bets. Marcus showed up at Kai's office on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining, one of those cold Chicago rains that promised winter wasn't far behind. The city looked gray and dreary through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kai's corner office. Kai was in a meeting with his financial advisors, legitimate ones, the kind who helped him transition dirty money into clean investments, when his assistant buzzed. "Sir, there's a Marcus Whitmore here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." Every instinct Kai had honed over years in his father's business screamed danger. But he kept his voice calm. Send him in. Marcus walked in like he owned the place. Expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the fact that he'd been drinking. Fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. The kind of swagger that came from privilege and entitlement and never being told no. Mr. Park. Marcus extended his hand. Thanks for seeing me. Kai didn't shake it. Didn't stand. Just leaned back in his chair and studied Marcus with the cold assessment of a predator sizing up prey. What do you want? Marcus's smile tightened. He sat down uninvited, crossing his legs casually. I think we got off on the wrong foot at the wedding. I wanted to apologize. Clear the air. I don't accept. Kai's voice was ice. I also wanted to talk business. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping through something. I heard you're looking for legitimate investment opportunities. Real estate, specifically. I have several properties that might interest you. I know exactly what properties you have. Kai leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. And I know how you paid for them. Marcus went pale. Just slightly, but Kai caught it. The way his hand tightened on his phone. The way his jaw clenched. I don't know what You've been laundering money for the past 3 years, Kai continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Using wedding vendors as fronts. Fake invoices, inflated costs, all running through Nandi's clients. Using her business, her reputation, her connections. Kai pulled out his own phone, opened a file, and slid it across the desk. You owe my organization $2 million. Money you stole. Money you thought no one would notice because you hid it in wedding deposits and vendor fees. Very clever. Almost worked. Marcus stared at the screen. Bank records. Transaction histories. Email threads discussing fees and vendor payments that were clearly coded language. Screenshots of offshore accounts. Everything meticulously documented. His hands shook. I can explain. I don't want explanations. Kai's smile was cold, predatory, the smile of someone who'd learned cruelty in his father's world. I want my money. 30 days, Marcus. Sell your properties, liquidate your assets, or I go to the FBI with everything. Bank records, transaction logs, email evidence. All of it. Marcus shot to his feet, his composure shattering. You're bluffing. Am I? Kai stood slowly, and despite being the same height as Marcus, his presence made the other man seem small. Test me. Please. I'd love an excuse to destroy you. He walked around the desk, stopping inches from Marcus. Close enough that Marcus could see the danger in his eyes. The kind of danger that came from growing up in a world where violence was a business tool. 30 days, Kai repeated. And Marcus? If you ever speak to Nandi again, if you even look at her, if you so much as think her name, I'll make sure you don't just lose your money. You'll lose everything. Your reputation. Your freedom. Your life as you know it. Marcus stumbled toward the door, his hands shaking so badly he almost couldn't turn the handle. Then he stopped, turned back. His eyes held a desperate, cornered animal gleam. She's using you, he spat, voice venomous. Nandi. This whole engagement is fake. She hired an actor to play her boyfriend at the wedding. Did she tell you that? Kai's expression didn't change. I know. What? I was the actor she hired. The one who showed up at the wedding. Kai's voice was perfectly calm. And yes, it started as a performance. A mutually beneficial arrangement. He stepped closer to Marcus, and even though Marcus was taller, Kai's presence made him shrink back. But you know what the difference is between you and me, Marcus? I saw Nandi's worth immediately. Her intelligence, her grace, her strength. Everything you were too blind and too selfish to appreciate when you had her. Kai leaned in, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She's not using me. We're building something real. Something you'll never understand because you don't know how to love anything except your own reflection. He stepped back, dismissing Marcus with a gesture. Now get out of my building. The clock starts now. 30 days. Marcus left, practically running. His face was red, his breathing ragged. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine fear. Kai returned to his desk and immediately called Nandi. We need to talk, he said when she answered. Marcus knows about the arrangement. There was a pause. Then, quietly, what did he say? That you hired an actor. That the engagement is fake. Kai looked out at the rain-streaked windows. I told him I knew. That it started as an arrangement but became real. Kai. He's going to try to expose us, Nandi. He's desperate and cornered, and he's going to lash out. Kai's voice was grim. We need to be prepared. What neither of them knew was that Marcus was already planning his revenge. That he'd contacted a blogger who specialized in society scandals. That he'd offered an exclusive story about Chicago's beloved matchmaker and her fraudulent engagement. The blog post went live 3 days later. Chicago Matchmaker'S engagement exposed as fraud. Sources confirm Nandi Nelson, founder of premium matchmaking service Hearts Connect, hired professional companion to pose as boyfriend at high society wedding. Questions raised about business practices, credibility, and whether her matches are as genuine as claimed. The anonymous source, who claims to be close to Nelson, states that the entire relationship with Korean businessman Kai Park is fabricated. She hired someone from an escort service, the source alleges. The whole thing is fake. It makes you wonder what else she's been lying about. Nelson, 34, has made a career matching Chicago's elite. Her client list reportedly includes several prominent families and business leaders. This revelation raises questions about her methods and the authenticity of her claimed success rate. Park, 34, runs an import-export business with rumored ties to organized crime. Neither Nelson nor Park responded to requests for comment. Nandi saw it during her morning coffee, scrolling through her phone while still in her silk robe. Her Ethiopian coffee, strong and spiced with cardamom, turned bitter in her mouth. Her phone started ringing immediately. First one call, then another, then another. Clients, colleagues, friends asking if it was true. Her business partner Melissa, panicking about what this meant for their reputation. A reporter from the Tribune wanting a statement. By noon, 5 couples had canceled their contracts, demanding full refunds. By 3 p.m., 2 reporters were camped outside her office building, cameras ready. By 5, her business email had over 200 messages. Some supportive, most angry, several threatening. Nandi sat at her desk, watching her entire career crumble in real time through her computer screen and phone notifications. Everything she'd built from nothing. Every late night, every sacrifice, every client she'd poured her heart into matching. Every person she'd helped find love. Gone. Or going. Disintegrating before her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Kai, where are you? My office. Don't move. I'm coming. Don't, she typed frantically. The press is here. It'll make things worse. I'm already downstairs. Nandi's heart lurched. She ran to the window and looked down 3 stories to the street below. Kai was emerging from his black Mercedes, moving toward the building entrance with that predatory confidence that parted crowds like water. Reporters swarmed him immediately, shoving microphones and cameras in his face like a pack of jackals sensing blood. Mr. Park, is it true your engagement to Nandi Nelson is fake? Did you know she hired an actor to play her boyfriend? Is this a publicity stunt? Are you involved in her business fraud? Is it true you have connections to organized crime? Kai stopped, turned to face the cameras. Nandi's blood turned to ice. Oh God, no, she whispered. She flew to the stairs, her heels clicking frantically against marble as she took them 2 at a time. Her heart hammered in her chest. What was he going to say? Was he going to deny everything? Confirm it? Make it worse? She burst through the lobby doors just as Kai started speaking. I have a statement, he said clearly, his voice carrying across the street with absolute authority. The cameras focused on him. Reporters went silent, recording devices thrust forward. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Cars passing on the street slowed down, drivers craning to see what was happening. Nandi Nelson hired what she thought was a professional companion for a wedding, Kai said, his voice steady and clear. She didn't know the agency made a mistake. She didn't know the man who showed up wasn't actually from the service she contacted. Nandi stopped at the edge of the crowd, unable to breathe. What was he doing? My family runs a traditional Korean matchmaking service, Kai continued, and Nandi realized he was controlling the narrative, spinning it, making it make sense. They arranged for me to meet Nandi without telling either of us the full truth. When I arrived at that wedding, I thought it was a business introduction. She thought I was a hired actor. He paused, and Nandi could see the calculated precision in his expression. This was Kai Park, the businessman, the strategist, the man who'd survived in a world that ate the weak. We were both victims of a well-meaning but misguided setup, Kai said to the assembled reporters. The engagement started as a misunderstanding. Two people thrown together by circumstance, trying to navigate a complicated situation. A reporter shouted, "So it was fake?" It started that way, Kai admitted, and Nandi's stomach dropped. His eyes scanned the crowd, found her. Their gazes locked across 20 feet of sidewalk and assembled press. But somewhere between that first wedding and today, something changed. The crowd murmured. Cameras swiveled between Kai and Nandi, capturing every moment. I fell in love with her, Kai said simply, still looking directly at Nandi. Completely. Terrifyingly. The kind of love that makes you want to be better. To build something legitimate. To deserve the person standing across from you. Nandi's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare at this man who was laying his heart bare in front of cameras and strangers and the entire city. I've built a career on control and calculated risk, Kai continued, his voice softening but still clear enough for every microphone to catch. But loving Nandi? That's the most uncontrolled thing I've ever done. She teaches people that real love requires honesty, vulnerability, and choosing someone every single day even when it's hard. Even when the world is watching and judging. He turned back to the cameras, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger. Nandi Nelson is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. She's brilliant, compassionate, and she has a gift for seeing what people need before they know themselves. She's helped hundreds of people find love. Real, lasting love. And anyone questioning her integrity or her methods is either ignorant or malicious. Kai pulled a small box from his pocket. Velvet, deep blue. Opened it. A ring caught the afternoon light, a single diamond, elegant and perfect, flanked by two smaller emeralds that seemed to glow. The emeralds are for her eyes, Kai said softly, but the microphones caught it. And the diamond is for her strength. He walked forward. The crowd parted before him like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. He moved with purpose, with certainty, until he stood directly in front of Nandi. Then Kai Park, heir to a criminal empire, businessman, someone who'd spent his entire life guarding his emotions, knelt on the wet sidewalk in the middle of Chicago. In front of cameras and reporters and strangers and God and everyone. He looked up at Nandi like she was his entire world. No contract this time, Kai said quietly, though the microphones caught every word. No terms. No arrangement. No 3-month limit. Just a question. Nandi's hands covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, and she didn't care who saw, didn't care that this would be on every news site and social media platform within the hour. Nandi Nelson, Kai said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his dark eyes, will you marry me? For real this time. Not because of my family or your reputation or any deal we made. But because I love you. Because you make me want to be the man you deserve. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The silence was absolute. Even the traffic seemed to quiet. Nandi looked at him, this dangerous, beautiful man who'd walked into her life by accident and changed everything. This man who saw her not as the successful matchmaker, or the immigrant's daughter, or the woman who needed to prove she belonged, but just as Nandi. Complex and flawed and worthy of love. She thought about her grandmother, who'd told her that love was the bravest thing a person could do. That opening your heart, knowing it could be broken, was the greatest act of courage. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Then louder, for everyone to hear, for the cameras and the microphones and the world, yes. 1,000 times yes. Kai slid the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. Then he stood, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers. Someone was definitely crying. Camera flashes created a strobe effect. Someone started a slow clap that others joined. And Nandi realized, standing there in Kai's arms with rain starting to fall and cameras flashing and her entire world transformed, that sometimes the best love stories start with a lie but end with the most honest truth you've ever told. But the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The FBI arrested Marcus Whitmore 48 hours later. 2 agents showed up at his condo at 6 a.m., badges out, handcuffs ready. They charged him with money laundering, wire fraud, and racketeering. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulous, impossible to refute. What Marcus didn't know, what he would never know, was that Kai had been cooperating with federal authorities for 18 months. Providing evidence, testimony, documentation. Not just about his own family's business, but about anyone he encountered in that world who crossed certain lines. Marcus had crossed every line. The money laundering through wedding vendors was just the beginning. Marcus had an entire criminal enterprise, fake businesses, shell corporations, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. He'd been stealing from clients, defrauding investors, laundering money for people even more dangerous than Kai's family. And Kai had handed the FBI everything they needed to dismantle it all. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nandi asked that night, curled up on Kai's couch in his penthouse. They could see the lights of Chicago spread out below them like a carpet of stars. "Because I needed you to be safe." Kai's fingers traced patterns on her arm, gentle and reverent. "If Marcus knew I was working with the authorities, he might have come after you. Tried to use you as leverage against me. You protected me." Nandi turned to look at him. "You protected me before you even loved me." "I loved you from that first kiss," Kai admitted quietly. "I just didn't know it yet." Nandi's business recovered slowly, but it recovered. Some clients came back, apologizing for doubting her. They'd seen the proposal, read the follow-up articles about Marcus's arrest, put the pieces together. New clients called, wanting the matchmaker whose love story had gone viral, who'd proven that even the experts at love sometimes found it in unexpected places. Local news ran features on her. National morning shows wanted interviews. A publisher reached out about a book deal, The Matchmaker's Heart, finding love when you least expect it. And through it all, Kai was there. Supporting her. Believing in her. Loving her with a fierceness that still took her breath away. His business transformed too. With FBI help and his cooperation, he'd successfully transitioned everything to legitimate operations. Legal imports and exports. Real estate investments. Tech startups. His father's empire cleaned and transformed into something he could be proud of. They got married 6 months later. Not 3 months as originally planned in their contract, but 6. They needed time to plan something that honored both their cultures, both their families, both their hearts. The venue was a historic mansion in Lake Forest, right on the lake. All sweeping gardens and water views and spaces large enough to hold the 150 guests they'd invited. It was early October, when Chicago's weather was perfect, cool enough to be comfortable, warm enough that outdoor photos were possible, the trees just starting to turn gold and red. Nandi wore a traditional Ethiopian habesha chemise for the ceremony, white cotton hand-embroidered with gold and green thread, the work so intricate it had taken artisans in Addis Ababa 3 months to complete. The fabric draped beautifully, and she wore her hair natural, her curls framing her face like a crown. For the reception, she changed into a gorgeous white wedding gown with gold accents, modern and sleek with a dramatic train. Kai wore a traditional hanbok for the Korean ceremony, deep blue with gold embroidery that matched Nandi's dress. For the reception, he switched to a custom tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a James Bond film. Young-hee cried through both ceremonies. She stood in the front row, tissues in hand, watching her son, her closed-off, damaged son, smile like he'd forgotten how to be unhappy. She caught Nandi's eye during the vows and mouthed, "Thank you." Nandi's mother flew in from Addis Ababa with what seemed like Nandi's entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins she hadn't seen in years. They filled the mansion with laughter and Amharic and the smell of Ethiopian coffee being prepared in traditional jabinas. "Your grandmother would have loved him," Nandi's mother whispered during the reception, watching Kai dance with young Hee on the floor. Traditional Korean music played, and Kai was teaching his mother a dance she'd taught him as a child. "She always said you needed someone who could match your fire." Nandi smiled, watching her husband move across the dance floor. She was right. The reception was a celebration of cultures. Ethiopian coffee ceremony, where Nandi's mother roasted beans and served coffee in small cups to the guests, explaining the tradition. Korean paibik ceremony, where Nandi and Kai bowed to their elders and received blessings and advice. Music that ranged from traditional Ethiopian jazz to K-pop to American R&B to keep everyone on the dance floor. Sarah and David Mitchell were there, the couple whose wedding had started this whole journey. They gave a toast about fate and timing and how sometimes the universe conspires to give you exactly what you need. When Kai pulled Nandi onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife, the DJ played a song they'd chosen together, a blend of Ethiopian and Korean melodies that a musician friend had created specifically for them. Kai held her close and whispered "Yuadahalihu" in her ear, "I love you" in Amharic, a phrase he'd practiced until his pronunciation was perfect. Nandi kissed him, not caring that everyone was watching, that cameras were capturing every moment. "I love you too," she whispered back. In English, because some things transcended language. They honeymooned in Ethiopia first, then South Korea. Nandi showed Kai Addis Ababa, the city of her childhood, the markets and churches and coffee houses. They visited her grandmother's grave, and Kai left flowers and bowed in respect. Nandi's relatives threw parties, fed them until they couldn't eat anymore, asked when babies were coming. In Seoul, Kai showed Nandi where he'd grown up. The streets he'd walked as a child. The school where he'd learned English. The restaurant where his father had taken him every Sunday. They visited his father's grave too, and Nandi stood quietly beside Kai as he spoke to the stone in Korean, words she didn't understand but felt the weight of. They returned to Chicago different people. Not because they'd changed, but because they'd solidified. Become more themselves, more confident in what they'd built together. 1 year after that first wedding, Nandi stood in the same ballroom at the Drake Hotel. But this time, she wasn't a guest. She was the matchmaker, orchestrating another perfect celebration. The bride and groom, her latest success story, exchanged vows at an altar covered in white roses. Nandi watched from the side, making sure every detail was perfect. The lighting, the music, the timing. This was what she did. This was her gift. "Everything looks beautiful," Sarah Mitchell said, appearing at Nandi's elbow. She was pregnant now, glowing with it. "You've outdone yourself." "It's what I do." Nandi smiled, watching the couple kiss to thunderous applause. "Speaking of what you do." Sarah grinned. "I heard you're expanding. Opening an office in New York?" Kai's idea, Nandi admitted. "He thinks Hearts Connect deserves a bigger platform." And he's probably right. We've had inquiries from all over the country. Her business had grown exponentially over the past year. The viral proposal, the media attention, the book deal that was now a bestseller. She had clients from New York to Los Angeles, all wanting the matchmaker who'd found her own happy ending in the most unexpected way. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Kai pressed a kiss to her neck, right below her ear where he knew she was sensitive. "How's the most beautiful matchmaker in Chicago?" he murmured. "Busy." But Nandi leaned back against him, savoring the warmth and solidity of him. The way he still made her heart race. "And technically, I'm the most beautiful matchmaker in Chicago and New York now." "My mistake." Kai's laugh rumbled against her back. "Ready to go?" "I made reservations at that Ethiopian restaurant you love." "The one in Uptown." "The reception just started." "I know. But I made reservations at that Ethiopian restaurant you love." "The one in Uptown." Kai turned her in his arms, and the look in his dark eyes made her pulse quicken. Thought we could recreate our first real date. That wasn't our first date. Our first date was that charity gala where you bought me at the bachelor auction for $10,000 just to make Marcus jealous. That was for show, Kai said softly. The Ethiopian restaurant was where we admitted this was real. Where you told me about your grandmother, and I told you about my father. Where we stopped performing. Nandi stretched up to kiss him, not caring that they were in public, that some of her clients were watching with knowing smiles. You're romantic for a former criminal. Reformed criminal, Kai corrected, grinning against her lips. Who now runs entirely legitimate import-export businesses and a very successful venture capital firm. Thank you very much. My reformed criminal. Nandi smiled, running her fingers through his hair. They slipped out of the reception hand in hand, like teenagers escaping prom. Kai's driver, the same one from that first night, smiled at them in the rearview mirror as they climbed into the Mercedes. As they drove through Chicago's glittering streets, rain just starting to fall in a light mist that made the city lights blur and shimmer, Nandi thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fake arrangement that became real. The contract that turned into a marriage. The stranger who became her everything. What are you thinking about? Kai asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in that way he always did. That I'm really glad Brandon from Companion Connect got food poisoning. Kai laughed, the sound rich and warm and completely unguarded in a way it never had been before he met her. That makes two of us. And I'm thinking, Nandi continued, turning to look at him, that maybe the universe knew what it was doing. Sending me you instead of some random actor. The universe, Kai said thoughtfully, his eyes dancing with amusement, or my very meddling aunt who definitely arranged that mix-up on purpose. Nandi's eyes widened. What? My aunt confessed last month at Sunday dinner. She'd heard about you through the Korean community grapevine, did her research, decided you were perfect for me. Kai grinned, genuine affection lighting his expression when he talked about his aunt's meddling. She deliberately sent me to that wedding knowing you'd be there. Knowing you'd hired someone. The entire setup was her doing from the beginning. That sneaky woman. Nandi started laughing, the sound bubbling up from deep in her chest. I need to send her the biggest thank you gift in the world. She'd like that. Kai pulled her close, tucking her against his side. Though she says your happiness is gift enough. And the promise of grandchildren to spoil. Grandchildren. Nandi raised an eyebrow. She's very traditional. And very persistent. Kai's hand moved to rest on Nandi's stomach, gentle and questioning. Though I told her we'd get there when we get there. Nandi covered his hand with hers. They hadn't talked about it explicitly, but lately she'd been thinking. About a little girl with Kai's eyes and her curls. Or a little boy with her smile and Kai's stubborn determination. About building a family as blended and beautiful as their cultures. Maybe not yet, she said softly. But someday. When Hearts Connect New York is established. When we're ready. Whenever you're ready, Kai said, and the promise in his voice made her chest tighten. I'm not going anywhere. They arrived at the restaurant, a small Ethiopian place called Addis Red Sea, tucked into an uptown storefront with red curtains and the smell of Berbera spice wafting out. It was where they'd had their first real date, where the performance had cracked and something genuine had emerged. Over Injera and Doro What and Tej Honey Wine, they talked about their future. The New York office opening in 3 months. The book tour Nandi had scheduled for spring. Kai's tech investments taking off. Maybe, eventually, starting a family. Can you imagine? Kai said, his eyes soft in the warm light. Little kids running around with your eyes and my stubbornness. Your stubbornness? Nandi raised an eyebrow. I think you mean my determination and your tendency to brood dramatically when things don't go your way. I don't brood. You absolutely brood. Just last week you sulked for 3 hours because your mother said she liked my kimchi better than yours. That's because you cheated. You asked her for her recipe. That's not cheating. That's being smart. Nandi grinned. And she loves me more than you now. Accept it. Kai laughed and reached across the table to pull her closer, kissing her over their shared platter. "I can accept that. As long as you love me most. Always," Nandi whispered against his lips. "Even when you brood." They drove home to their penthouse, Nandi having moved in 3 months after the wedding. She'd kept her Lincoln Park apartment as an office, a place to meet clients who wanted privacy, but home was here. With Kai. With the life they were building. They stood on the balcony, looking out at Chicago spread beneath them. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. Lake Michigan stretched dark and infinite to the east. "Do you ever regret it?" Nandi asked quietly. "The way we started?" Kai turned to look at her, really look at her. This woman who'd stumbled into his life by accident. This woman who'd cracked open his carefully constructed armor. This woman who'd taught him that love wasn't weakness, but the bravest thing a person could do. "Never," he said firmly. "Not for a single second. You're the best mistake I ever made." Nandi smiled, leaning into him. "We're going to have to tell our kids the truth someday. About how we really met. We'll tell them about my meddling aunt who played matchmaker." Kai wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "We'll tell them their mother hired an actor and got me instead. We'll tell them about a fake engagement that became the realest thing in our lives. Think they'll believe us? Probably not. It sounds too much like a fairy tale." Kai pressed a kiss to her temple. "But we'll tell them anyway. Because it's ours. And it's perfect precisely because it started imperfect." Somewhere in Chicago, Nandi's clients were building lives together. Young he was probably praying for grandchildren. Nandi's mother was likely on the phone with relatives in Addis Ababa, bragging about her son-in-law. And in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a matchmaker and a reformed criminal held each other and marveled at the strange, wonderful paths that led to love. 2 years later, Nandi stood in the nursery of their penthouse, rocking a baby girl with Kai's dark eyes and her curls. Maya Park Nelson, named for both their grandmothers, slept peacefully against her chest. Kai appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled from meetings. But when he saw his wife and daughter, his entire expression softened. "How are my girls?" he whispered. "Perfect," Nandi said softly. "She's been asleep for an hour. I just like holding her." Kai wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. "We made something pretty amazing." "We did." Nandi looked up at him, eyes suspiciously bright. "Your aunt called. She's already planning Maya's first birthday party. Apparently there's a traditional Korean ceremony we need to do." "Of course she is." Kai laughed quietly. "She's probably already picking out potential husbands for when Maya turns 20. 20? She'll be married off by 18 if your aunt has her way." They stood together, the 3 of them, watching the Chicago skyline turn from dusk to night. Nandi's phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. She frowned, carefully extracting it from her pocket without disturbing Maya. The screen showed a flood of notifications. Emails. Text messages. News alerts. Her heart stopped. "Kai," she whispered, her voice trembling. He looked at the screen over her shoulder. His entire body went rigid. "Breaking news. FBI announces arrest of international crime syndicate. Anonymous tip leads to largest bust in Chicago history." The article loaded. Photos appeared. Faces Kai knew. Associates of his father's who'd refused to go legitimate. The ones who'd been threatening him for 2 years, demanding he continue the family's criminal operations. The ones who'd made subtle threats about what could happen to people he loved if he didn't cooperate. All of them. Arrested. Neutralized. "I don't understand," Nandi breathed. Kai's phone rang. He answered, his face unreadable. "Yes." He listened for a moment. "I see. Thank you for letting me know." He hung up and looked at Nandi, and there were tears in his eyes. Actual tears. "It's over," he said, his voice breaking. "The FBI agent I've been working with just called. They got everyone. Every single person who's been threatening us. Threatening our family." "How?" Nandi asked. "Marcus," Kai said, and a disbelieving laugh escaped him. Marcus, of all people. He made a deal with the FBI. gave them everything he knew about the crime families operating in Chicago, including everyone connected to my father's old organization. He testified against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. Nandi stared at him. Marcus helped us? Apparently prison gave him time to think. Time to realize that destroying us wouldn't fix his life. Kai pulled both Nandi and Maya closer. The agent said Marcus specifically requested that the information be used to protect you, to make sure you and our family would be safe. In a federal prison across town, Marcus Whitmore sat in his cell, staring at a photo he'd cut from a magazine. Nandi and Kai at some charity gala, smiling at each other like nothing else in the world mattered. He'd spent 2 years planning revenge. 2 years making connections, gathering information, building alliances. And then, one day, he'd realized something. Nandi Nelson had never destroyed his life. He'd destroyed his own life, and he'd tried to take her down with him. She'd just refused to let him. She'd found love. Real, genuine, earth-shattering love. The kind he'd never been capable of giving or receiving. And Kai Park had protected her with everything he had. The kind of fierce, unconditional devotion Marcus had never understood. So Marcus had made a different choice. He'd gone to the FBI and given them everything. Not for a reduced sentence, though he'd take it. But because somewhere in his alcohol-soaked, narcissistic brain, he'd found a shred of decency. If he couldn't have happiness, at least he could give it to someone who deserved it. Consider it a wedding gift, he muttered to the empty cell. You're welcome, Nelson. Back in the penthouse, Nandi was crying now. Full, gasping sobs of relief she didn't even know she'd been holding back. We're free, she whispered. We're actually free. We're free, Kai confirmed, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. No more looking over our shoulders. No more threats. No more danger. Just us. Just our family. Just our life. Maya stirred in Nandi's arms, making a small sound. She opened her eyes, those dark eyes she'd inherited from her father, and looked up at her parents. And in that moment, everything that had seemed impossible 2 years ago crystallized into perfect, beautiful reality. A matchmaker who'd hired a fake boyfriend. A businessman who'd shown up to the wrong wedding. A meddling aunt who'd orchestrated fate. An ex-boyfriend who'd found redemption in the strangest way possible. And a love that had started as performance and become the truest thing either of them had ever known. Kai pulled out his phone and took a photo. The three of them, backlit by the Chicago skyline, Maya between them, Nandi's tears still wet on her cheeks, all of them glowing with the kind of happiness that comes after surviving something you weren't sure you'd survive. He sent it to his mother with a simple caption, "We're safe. We're happy. We're home." Young-hee's response came immediately, "Thank God. And tell my granddaughter her Halmoni will be there tomorrow with enough food to feed an army." Nandi laughed through her tears. "Your mother is going to spoil Maya rotten." "Absolutely," Kai agreed. "And so is yours. And my aunt. And probably every single person we've ever met." "Good," Nandi said fiercely, looking down at their daughter. "She deserves to be surrounded by love. She deserves to grow up safe and happy and free." "She will be," Kai promised. "Because of you. Because you taught me that love isn't weakness. That choosing someone, choosing to build something real, is the bravest thing we can do." Nandi looked up at him, this man who'd walked into her life by accident and become her everything. "We did it. We actually did it. We did." Kai kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "We gambled on each other. And we won everything." In the nursery of a Chicago penthouse, under the glow of city lights and the watchful eyes of the stars, a family held each other close. A matchmaker who'd found her perfect match. A businessman who'd found his heart. And a baby girl who would grow up hearing the story of how her parents fell in love through a comedy of errors, a fake engagement, and the bravest gamble either had ever taken. Some love stories are planned. Some are matched. Some follow all the rules. And some explode into existence through chaos and circumstance and the kind of serendipity that makes you believe in fate. This was that kind of love story. The kind that starts with a lie and ends with a truth so powerful it sets you free. The kind that transforms criminals into heroes and matchmakers into believers. The kind that proves that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is the thing you never saw coming. Nandi Nelson had spent her career creating perfect matches for other people. But her own perfect match had found her when she'd hired the wrong person for a fake date to a wedding she'd rather have skipped. Kai Park had spent years building walls around his heart to survive in a dangerous world. But those walls had crumbled the moment a beautiful Ethiopian woman had kissed him on a dance floor and made him believe in second chances. And Maya Park Nelson would grow up knowing that love doesn't have to make sense to be real. That family can be built from the strangest foundations. That sometimes the universe, or a meddling aunt, or even a vengeful ex-boyfriend finding redemption, conspires to give you exactly what you need. This is how their story ends. Not with danger or drama or revenge, but with freedom, with safety, with a baby sleeping peacefully between two people who'd gambled everything on each other and won. The matchmaker had made her greatest match. The businessman had found his redemption. And the fake engagement had become the realest thing in either of their lives. In a city of millions, in a penthouse overlooking an endless lake, 3 hearts beat in perfect synchronicity. And somewhere in Chicago, another person was hiring a fake date. Another couple was meeting by accident. Another love story was beginning in the most unexpected way. Because that's how the best stories start. Not with perfection, but with possibility. The end. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for. Until next time, remember to subscribe.